Okay. Thank you, everybody, for coming to the fourth hearing of our International People's Tribunal on U.S. imperialism, sanctions, blockades, and coercive economic measures. This is our fourth hearing after having done hearings on Libya, Zimbabwe, and North Korea. I am one of the two rapporteurs. My name is Max Eil. I am a research fellow at Ghent University, working on national liberation struggles and the intellectual history of Arab developmental thought. I'm also a co-founder of the Tribunal, and I will be presenting and moderating. And if there are any questions or concerns, you can message me in private or one of the other rapporteurs. So I'm going to introduce the tribunal and its aims, and then I'm going to introduce the jurists, the rapporteurs, and the expert witnesses. I would like to give a special thanks to Charlotte Cates for back-ending all the technical aspects, and also especially Ed Kishawi for dealing with a lot of linguistic aspects today. Thank you to our translators, Fakhr al-Islam and Isam Iskandar, for their hard work during this hearing. Our goals. We have three main goals. One, we aim to build international consensus around the illegality of sanctions and against US imperialism. Two, to distinguish sanctions against Israel and South Africa from sanctions as a tool of imperialism, as in the ongoing sanctions against Iran, Venezuela, Palestine, Syria, Cuba, Zimbabwe. And third, to build an international anti-imperialist movement targeting the United States government. We are using the tribunal as an organizing political, education, and legal tool. And furthermore, we aim to identify causes of action to deploy in international and US courts. I'm now going to introduce our jurists. First, we have Prabhat Patnaik, who is a professor emeritus at the Center for Economic Studies and Planning at Jawaharlal Nehru University in New Delhi. His books include Accumulation and Stability Under Capitalism, The Value of Money, Re-envisioning Socialism, and most recently, Capitalism and Imperialism, Theory, History, and the Present, co-authored with Utsa Patnaik. Welcome, Prabhat, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
We then have Jaribu Hill, who is a civil and human rights attorney. She is the founder and executive director of the Mississippi Workers Center for Human Rights in support of the human rights struggles of workers across the globe. Jaribu has traveled to Asia, Africa, Europe, and the Caribbean. Through her organization, Hill has provided legal representation and advocacy for hundreds of workers in the state, and her efforts have led to the adoption of zero tolerance against hate workplace policies. Hill also won an important judgment against the Ku Klux Klan in Pelion, South Carolina, and has assisted Mississippi Delta parents in their fight for school equity. Welcome, and thank you for joining us, Jaribu.
Thank you, Max.
Our third juror for today is Maria Lahud, who is the Deputy Legal Director at the Center for Constitutional Rights, a New York-based nonprofit which works with communities under threat to fight for justice and liberation through litigation, advocacy, and strategic communications. Maria joined the center in 2003, where she has sought accountability for international law violations and defended Palestinian rights advocates under attack in the United States. So thank you, Maria, for joining us today. We appreciate your presence. Finally, we have Dr. Mohammed Tay, who is the chair of the Kana Observatory of Human.
Max, I think we lost you.
10. He is also a professor of constitutional law at the Islamic University of Lebanon. He is a former member of the Lebanese University Council and the Association of Instructors at the Lebanese University, and a member of the International Association of Democratic Lawyers. Thank you, Dr. Mohammed Tay, for joining us. Finally, my fellow rapporteur today is Dr. Matteo Capasso. Matteo is the Marie Curie Global Fellow at Columbia University and the University of Venice. He is the author of Everyday Politics in the Libyan Arab Jamhuriya that constructs the 2 decades before the regime change operation. He currently focuses his research on US-led imperialism, the political economy of war, and contemporary Libya. Since 2013, he has been working for Middle East Critique, currently as managing editor.
Thanks, Max. Well, as a second rapporteur, I'm just interjecting. Hopefully, Max is gonna come back. I want to remind you, everybody who's joining the call, that there is a chance for a live simultaneous translation from English to Arabic. You just need to click on the globe at the bottom of the screen where it's written interpretation, and there you can choose in which language you would like to hear our hearing, or to follow our hearing today. Okay. Yeah, it's just that it didn't. Yeah, we should pass to the speakers that we're having today. Max, can you continue now?
Okay. Yes. So I'm not sure if I got cut out, but we should now be hearing from Dr. Ahlam Beydoun. So thank you, and please go ahead with your presentation.
Sanctions against Lebanon, that the means justifies the goal. The United States of America has followed 2 different ways in sanctions against Lebanon, a direct approach and indirect approach. The goal was to impose sanctions upon Lebanon to make things tough for the regime that the United States deemed or rendered led by Hezbollah, or taking orders from them, which does not help Israel in the region. As for the means, it was through legislating domestic American laws. The most important of these laws were the laws of laws to fight money laundering and financing of terrorism, which happened after September 11th, 2001, on the attacks of September 11th. Lebanon was never spared of such legislation. The first one was 2015 by preventing international funding to Hezbollah, IFEE 1, and the law, SIFEE 2, for 2012, and the suggestion from a new law from preventing Hezbollah for money laundering in 2020. As for the non-sanction types of punishment that wasn't given, there was a Magnitsky global law that was initially made to punish Russia, but it included Lebanon. For the American administration, punished a few people that they deemed that are linked to Hezbollah, and they punished them. So they targeted the Qard al-Hassan organization that works outside the Lebanese banking system. The second law, which basically Lebanon was punished for, was to punish Syria, and this happened through the law of through the implied meaning in this law, which basically deems dealing with Syria as based on the eternal relationship between Lebanon and Syria for all the trade and the geographic proximity they have to the West. So those who are affected from this law, and there is no stronger way of this than how they were prevented from energy supplies, the same way that they were prevented from fuel supply from Egypt. And the same happened for Iran, which was prevented from receiving aid, especially fuel. These sanctions on the regime level went on the American sanctions went that every American person who supports, aids, comforts, or bankrolls any of the Hezbollah institutions, even if they're civil organizations or live or media related organizations. These sanctions also is any foreign person that the president deems that is related to collecting money for Hezbollah, or any character of any foreign or figurative person who has anything to do with it. It also relates to the locals and the foreigners who have any sort of loyalty or allegiance to Hezbollah, to any of the money funds that they need. The absolute power given to the American president is very dangerous, which was given so that he could decide and witch hunt who's deemed as punishable based on very broad and vague standards of relation to terrorism. The sanctions which are legislated range between freezing their assets in the United States or under the supervision of any American person and not giving them any type of visas or permits, and voiding all of their previously granted visas. The expansion of these punishments chokes the economic activity of these people that could affect them or impact them. It also affects the entities that they deal with them, whether commercially or contractually or through any type of commerce or services. It also leads to preventing them from opening bank accounts or receiving any wire transfers, or to move their accounts from anywhere to conduct business on the world stage, especially with the nations that will implement these legal adjustments. These punishments leads to basically ostracize and to exclude them from international trade because of the risks that's known, which could produce another dangers, which is no less significant than the first one, which makes these people not make them subject to the laws of the sovereign state, which makes them evade taxation. On the other end, these new sanctions or these measures on all of these nations, which are deemed terrorism sponsoring nations, by listing Hezbollah, both its militia and civilian units. These sanctions include every foreign organization that deals with any representative or any minister from Hezbollah. Third, the entities that were targeted, the banks. In 2001, the Canadian Lebanese Bank was targeted, and this bank was forced to close its doors and to pay $102 million for the sake of the court in America. In 2019, Jamal's Trust Bank was disappeared, and it's among 11 Lebanese banks that were targeted for a legal company that represents 150 families related to 1,000 soldiers that were killed and injured in Iraq during the war, and claiming that these bombs were made by Iran and Hezbollah. And the Lebanese banks were incapable of paying the fees and to resume their business and transactions. The American sanctions impacted the Lebanese banking sector entirely and compromised it. And the smaller banks wanted to stop dealing in US dollars, but the central bank refused that. The Lebanese banks were put under heavy sanctions to the point that they sent supervisors to supervise money laundering to the American banks and to the American Treasury to mitigate any type of impression that they sympathize with Hezbollah. And the American obsession and focus on Hezbollah to this point, it compromised entirely the Lebanese economy. So HIFP1 in 2015, the American government listed 99 account holders in Lebanon that they wanted to close their accounts. So the Lebanese banks complied by closing thousands of accounts. Recently, a new call came against the Kuwaiti National Bank, or the Kuwait National Bank. It's the national bank of the state, as the report indicated. It targeted a few specific characteristics: special businessmen, and the U.S. Treasury also target Ahmed Beydoun, the businessman, in addition to 5 of his partners and 8 of his companies in Lebanon and Iraq, by the claims that these companies bankroll Hezbollah. The businessman Mohammed Bazni was extricated to Romania and arrested on the allegations that he funds Hezbollah, according to the various companies he owns. The second group of punished people are people who are accused of corruption. And it's a title is a righteous one, but it has a wicked goal to it, that according to the law in 2013, in the same year, there were sanctions. 2 ministers who were tend to be pro-leaning or close to Hezbollah. In 2021, the American embassy in Beirut did the law of Magnitsky Global for fighting corruption will follow 16 Lebanese figures on allegations of corruption. And in the case that they're implicated, that they'll be punished. And these punishments are linked to corruption and cannot be affected by political changes. And that the extent of these changes cannot be changed. These are just, the allegation of fighting terrorism is just a bunch of slogans. And the American administration used that just as they used the same trick, if that was in fact had any validity to it. If that was the case, they would have never imposed any governments that were never corrupt, whether it happened in Iran or Venezuela or anywhere else. These sanctions were captured on Middle East Eye website, reporting the financial war of terror against terrorism held by America. And in the same year that the extent of these sanctions was under great scrutiny from the American Treasury, under the title of money laundering. This left a very limited impact on Hezbollah for not being able to be involved in the Lebanese banking and financial system. Yet that these sanctions, the impact of these systems is very big on Hezbollah and many of the financial and economic institutions, but also on the nations who were listed as harborers of this terrorism. But it impacted the Lebanese people the most, as it hit with the internal corruption problem that already existed in Lebanon. And it also threatened the Lebanese citizens and the whole entity of the Lebanese people. And they spoke to the sanctions, the American sanctions that went against Hezbollah, whether on the political front, since some of these entities that support the party try to blame on them all the economic and banking and financial problems in Lebanon. Yet the American-backed attempts of do this to undermine Lebanon, all of it, yet most of the people stayed behind them. And this is what happened in the coalition of political parties in 2015. That they target Hezbollah, but unfortunately the sanctions hit the Lebanese people. That the reflections of the sanctions upon the Lebanese people entirely, that made them close a lot of banks and a lot of financial services tools that normal Lebanese people use. And in addition to the citizens who use their banks for their salaries. And it started to corrode as a result of the corrosion and the freezing of the Lebanese currency. And it affected the purchasing power of the Lebanese people on all sorts of services and products which they need, whether it's immediately or long-term. And all of these reports of the Central Statistical Agency showed that all of the prices of goods and services increased about 6,000% from 2016 to 2021. And there was an increase in 142% since all the services and the goods and the various goods and the insurance products were recorded to be the highest, which 40%, and then followed by water, fossil fuel, electricity, and gas, until it went to 34%, and then communications, including internet, which exceeded 226%. All of these percentages compounded in 2023. A dollar became 82,000 lira, Lebanese lira, until it was 1,000 lira in prior times. So it began to jump daily. As for the rate of unemployment, so it recorded Lebanon is living in economic ruin. And the cases of looting and kidnapping increasing because of the anxieties and the fear of disease, famine, and hunger. And these cases of kidnapping have went up throughout the year of 2022. It was 50 years after it was 50 crimes after it was 12 years the prior year, which is an increase of 316%. And this is only including the crimes that are reported, because these crimes are not made for the purpose of criminality, but also only to cope with living demands. It showed that 52% of people who seek to immigrate because of the economic and financial cases, after there was a complete paralysis of all of the entities and services in the structure of the state, according to the Statistical Agency. and that there was such major impacts that increased the number of families that live under the line of poverty to 47% as compared to the world average of 22%. 36% live under the line of poverty in Lebanon, compared to 9%. And the compound inflation increased since 2019. So the inflation in Lebanon has recorded 100% in 2022, compared to the world inflation rate of 2.2%. According to reports to the general economy, this it has a lot, it takes a morale on the emotional, psychological mood of the Lebanese people. And it also reflects the general character of the Lebanon. The continuing of the collapse of 95% of the value of the currency. In addition to other circumstances, which created such a compromise and such a tremor in the Lebanese economy, the Lebanon economy, the central Lebanese bank that already is accused of corruption with the politicians, whether they refuse or accept financial transactions and to pay the salaries of the employees and various other services. Instead, they started to basically create their own market of the US dollar and Lebanese lira. There are local reports that the Lebanese bank is incapable of controlling prices in the market, and they cannot elect the head of Lebanese treasury who do not do anything independent of American orders. In addition to the manager of the Lebanese banking system and attempts to sanction and to boycott them in the dealings with the Lebanon, which makes a lot of their
Dr. Ahlam, we would appreciate if you could move to the conclusion. Great. So thank you, Dr. Ahlam. I'm very sorry for losing the connection while I was introducing you before. So everyone, thank you very much for listening to this testimony from Dr. Ahlam Beydoun, who I will now introduce, who engaged in her graduate studies in international law in France and earned her doctorate in Belgium. She is a professor of public and private international law at the Lebanese University. And her books include The Complexity of Sovereignty and the State, Lebanon as a Model, and Collective Security under International Order. She has written dozens of legal and political research articles, which can be found on the website of the Lebanese University Faculty of Law, Branch 2, and elsewhere on the internet. So thank you, Ahlam, very much. We will now hear from Dr. Jamal Wakim, who is at the Lebanese University History Department in Beirut, Lebanon. He has a longstanding career as a distinguished journalist before taking up work as an academic, and has written widely on Lebanese politics and a wide range of issues related to the case of the Palestinian refugees in Lebanon. He has furthermore widely interviewed top Lebanese and Palestinian politicians from the leading political parties across the ideological spectrum. So we are very honored to have you with us. Thank you, Dr. Jamal Wakim, and you may please go ahead.
Thank you. Well, I will talk in my presentation about the role of the United States in all Israeli aggressions that I have been witness to since 1982 onward. Okay? Hello? Do you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, fine. So, I was 10 years old when Israel invaded Lebanon. That was in 1982. And back then, the pretext of Israel was to fight terrorism represented by the PLO that was stationed in Lebanon since 1969. And the invasion started by a massive bombardment, air raids on June 4th. It was a Friday, and the air raid started, I believe, around 2 p.m. and lasted for 2 hours. They resulted in the killing of 200 people and the injury of hundreds more. At the time, the land invasion started on June 6th, and it lasted for another 3 months. During this period, the Israelis besieged the camps, the Palestinian camps in the south. They occupied Sur, then Saida, before heading north towards Beirut. And meanwhile, due to their indiscriminate attacks on military objectives and on civilian objectives, hundreds of civilians got killed. By August 1982, the toll of the victims rose to 19,000, according to official figures. And Beirut was under siege, West Beirut actually, because the capital was divided into a Christian sector under the control of the Phalange Party and a Muslim or a mixed, actually, it was mixed sector in West Beirut under the occupation or the control of the nationalist movement and the Palestinian, the PLO, in addition to the Syrian army at the time. So massive bombardment of the city that was besieged, electricity, water were cut off. And this also resulted in thousands of victims. By August, the Americans who gave the green light for the invasion, and it was this was recorded, this was well referenced, especially with the declarations of then Secretary of Defense Alexander Haig, who had to resign later on, and he due to his role in giving the green light for the invasion of Lebanon, and he resigned actually after the massacre of Sabra and Shatila. So the PLO withdrew from Beirut according to a ceasefire that was brokered by then Philip Habib, the US emissary to Beirut. And the Americans, who tried to play the role of the broker and of the mediator, they were actually part of the invasion. They sent their forces alongside other NATO forces to Beirut as part of the multinational corps that was supposed to keep to protect the civilians and ensure the withdrawal of the PLO, but these were withdrawn actually on the eve of the massacre of Sabra and Shatila a few days earlier, actually, and this poses a question about the implication of the multinational forces and what happened in Sabra and Shatila, the massacre, which started on on September 15 in the evening, and lasted for 3 days and resulted in the killing of 4,000 Palestinians and Lebanese, actually. They were mixed. Our house wasn't far from the camp at the time. And I remember seeing refugees running away from the massacre in the streets of Beirut at the time. After the Israeli withdrawal, of course, the multinational forces came back to Beirut under the pretext of helping the government, the Lebanese government at the time, but they took part in the combat that ensued between the Phalange government at the time and the opposition. And the Americans bombarded Dahieh, bombarded Mount Lebanon on behalf of the Phalange government at the time. And thousands of people got killed due to these military operations, to which the US was part. Afterwards, the US, of course, there were attacks targeting the US soldiers and the French soldiers. The US withdrew their forces, I believe it was in early March 1984. They completed their withdrawal after the shift in the balance of power. Another aggression that the United States was part of was the Israeli aggression against Lebanon in 1993. For a whole week, it was in July 1993, and the attack was under the pretext of the Israelis fighting, quote unquote, the terrorists. They were targeting Hezbollah, but the real reason for this was not, let's say, to ward off threats to what they considered as Israeli civilians, but the real reason was to exert political pressure on Lebanon and Syria at the time in order for them not to oppose the unilateral peace talks between the PLO and Israel, which resulted in the Oslo Agreement a few weeks later. And the US gave the green light also to this aggression. They intervened on several occasions to block any attempt to impose a ceasefire by the United Nations. They used their veto in order to prevent this from happening. And in the end, Lebanon and Syria bowed to the pressure, and Oslo Agreement was signed on September 13, 1993. Another aggression that the United States was part of was the April 1996 aggression against Lebanon. This lasted for a longer period. July 1993 lasted for a week. I remember the aggression against Lebanon in 1996, April 1996. It lasted for 16 days, as far as I remember. And it was preceded by a conference that was called for by the United States in Sharm el-Sheikh in Egypt that gathered the United States, Western powers, and the majority of the Arab states under the pretext of fighting terrorism. The reason for this gathering was to give the green light for a new Israeli aggression against Lebanon. This time, it was supposed to boost the image of Shimon Peres, who was supposed to run for elections against Benjamin Netanyahu at the time in June 1996. So the aggression was supposed to boost the image of Shimon Peres. Of course, there was a green light by the United States. There were calls by several powers to see for a ceasefire that was blocked by the United States. Of course, Israel used American weapons in bombing the civilians, and hundreds of civilians got killed in the aggression, in addition to the to hundreds of thousands of refugees who had to leave the south towards Beirut and to towards the central and northern parts of Lebanon. At the time, there was a big massacre that was committed by the Israeli forces against the civilians who went to seek refuge with the UNIFIL in South Lebanon. And this is the massacre famous as the Qana massacre, because the majority of the people who got killed were refugees from Qana village. After 16 days, the Israelis couldn't achieve their objectives by destroying the Lebanese resistance, and they had to call for a ceasefire, accept a ceasefire. The result was that Shimon Peres couldn't boost his image and he failed in the elections, but it was an election, or his campaign was tainted by the blood of Lebanese and Palestinian civilians in Lebanon. Another aggression, of course, throughout this period, throughout the Israeli occupation of South Lebanon, starting in 1978 up to 2000, Israel used American weapons to bomb us. It used also, it was always sponsored by the United States, that always blocked any attempt by the United Nations to intervene and impose UN resolutions, or let's say pass UN resolutions that could criticize Israel and call for its unconditional withdrawal from Lebanese territories, which Israel had to do in 2000 under the pressure of the Lebanese resistance, actually. In 2006, there was it was the last major Israeli aggression against Lebanon. At the time, the United States, the Bush administration, was trying to promote its agenda for a new Middle East by trying to pressure certain powers such as the Lebanese resistance, Syria, Iran, and other powers to bow to its will for a new geopolitical map of the region. And that was the reason why, under the call for a new order in the Middle East, promoted at the time by Condoleezza Rice, and Israel was given the green light to attack Lebanon on July 13, 2006. This time, the aggression lasted for 33 days, and it resulted in the killing of hundreds of civilians and, of course, hundreds of thousands of refugees. And Israel kept on attacking us, despite the fact that some voices among the Israeli military and the Israeli government were calling for a ceasefire. They were pressured by the United States to continue their attack in order for the United States to get certain political objectives, which it couldn't reach actually. And it was only after 33 days that the aggression stopped. Afterwards, we always have Israeli incursions onto Lebanese territories, water and airspace. But whenever we seek or we appeal to the United Nations, we are blocked by the US veto, which proves or gives further evidence on the US implication aggressions against us. This is what I have to say. I hope that I have been straight to the point.
Thank you very much, Jamal. That was much appreciated and very elucidating. So thank you for the contribution.
Thank you.
And for joining us. Now we will hear from our last witness. That is Dr. Zaher Anwar el-Khatib, a lifelong activist with a long-standing family history of activism. Dr. Zaher is a lawyer, former member of parliament, former minister of state for administrative reform, and finally, the Secretary General of the Toilers Association, a political party. So now, please, we are very happy to welcome Dr. Zaher. Please go ahead. And if there's a problem with the bandwidth, I'm worried there might be, you can switch to audio only.
Okay. Good evening for everybody. Can you hear me, please?
Yes.
Okay. I'll speak in Arabic. مداخلتي طبعا.
My intervention, of course, deals with United States trial on U.S. crimes and massacres. One, the dividing of Korea, South Korea supported by the US, and North Korea, the scientific socialists. Two, the military coup against Mossadegh in Iran in 1953. US is behind it. This is a known fact in the Arab and Muslim world. People chant US is great Satan. Third, the military coup against Elendi and killing him, and behind that was the United States, the great Satan. And fourth, Vietnam, under destruction and bombs and the destruction of millions under the rebels. And behind that was the United States, the great Satan. Fifth, the Afghanistan. Sixth, Iran. Destruction of mosques, churches, museums, universities. Iraq, Syria, and the Caesar law. May God condemn them and condemn Caesar. Of course, the complicity of the rulers of the Gulf, and we condemn that, particularly the Saudi Arabia role. And now they are reviewing the relationship with Iran. We talk about Yemen and what they did in Yemen. the going against all international law and the law of
and stealing of artifacts and all aspects of civilizations. So therefore we are before all of these atrocities and transgressions, all the decrees and the agreements of Earth, The Hague, all of the trials known as the Nuremberg trials, which was brought into the Human Rights Manifesto, whether it's in The Hague, Geneva, 1907, 1945. We are before these, all of these. So therefore, what can I say as a conclusion? I just wanted to be brief. I sought to be brief for Libya and Gaza and Eritrea and Yemen and Cuba and Venezuela and Zimbabwe and Syria and Sudan and Ethiopia and Haiti. So more than 11 nations almost who here are involved. First of all, as we say, chapeau, or recognition of Frantz Fanon, who established the organization, who founded the organization that creates Black solidarity for those, for Sudan, and those who are facing racism and violence and their trials before the judicial systems and the courts of the people. The popular courts have handed down their verdict of condemnation priorly. رقم 4 Vietnam. Vietnam under bombs, destruction, and the death of millions of Vietnamese. They are
the crisis
beneath the
of
rubble,
Vietnam and the
and that's
bombardment
backed also
of
by the great
Vietnam,
America,
the United
Afghanistan,
States,
Iran, America,
was the reason
Iraq,
of that
the ruin of
bombardment of Vietnam.
temples, churches, universities, hospitals, and culture houses.
Mr. Zaher is now talking about the role of United States in
and the
war against Vietnam.
Syria and the law of Caesar, may God curse all their Caesars. The economic sanctions scheming with the rulers of the Gulf, specifically Saudi Arabia, to go against international accords and even the decrease of heaven and earth, to burn books and to steal artifacts and all aspects of civilization, which is a complete breach of agreements of The Hague of 1907 and the Accords of Geneva, and the accords that were manifest in the founding principles of Nuremberg. In conclusion, I have nothing but to say all thanks and appreciation to Libya and Gaza and Eritrea and Yemen and Cuba and Venezuela and Zimbabwe and Syria and the Sudan and Ethiopia and Haiti and so on and so forth. As for these who are involved, I extend my greetings to Frantz Fanon.
Okay.
And those who are tortured on earth, and based on it, those who are impoverished and those who are weakened and poor and tortured, all of the terms made of the believers and the fighters in the same, put them in the same trench with the socialists. Therefore, the call that we coined in the phase of history in our fights in Iran and in the areas of our slogan was, "O you believers, O you socialists, unite." Meaning, O workers of the world, unite. O laborers of the world, Christian, Muslim, believers, and secular socialists, all unite. We extend our solidarity and greeting to you and gratitude to every one of you as we in Lebanon continue to fight with you in solidarity. In solidarity, we have the honor to be the from Qasim Soleimani, Che Guevara, Castro, Jesus Christ, Muhammad, Prophet Muhammad, Spartacus, but even before Christ himself, that we fight alongside all of those names mentioned. Thank you. And I continue to wait if there are any continuation of this panel to listen to the witnesses and what the tribunal decrees. Thank you very much.
هل هناك ثمة أسئلة؟
Are there any questions?
We're actually we're going to move open to questions from the jurors. So they will address their questions to all the presenters.
Can I ask a question? You see, I was here during the Libya hearing, and in the case of Libya, as in the case of Iran, there was a substantial freezing of the foreign exchange assets of the country in the capitalist metropolis, that is the American, European banks and so on. Was there a similar freezing of Lebanese foreign currency assets in the banks in Europe and America? And if so, what was the amount involved?
Thank you so much, Dr. Patnaik, for your question. Do any of the expert witness would like to respond and our answer to this question? Dr. Ahlam?
The sanctions against Lebanon were not against the Lebanese government, but imposed sanctions on Hezbollah. But Lebanon was impacted directly, whether on Syria or Iran. Lebanon was affected from these sanctions. That the United States did not impose direct sanctions upon the Lebanese government, yet it withheld the funds of Lebanese businessmen and they imposed so many fees on them, to the point that the Lebanese government could not keep up with payments and disbursements, but it could not fulfill its payment duties that are imposed by American courts, excuse me. And that ended up shutting them down. So it could not pay, so therefore they defaulted, if you will, and they shut them down. Meaning that the United States did not take the bonds of the Lebanese state, but the speaker is inaudible at this point. That it has a large reserve of gold.
Mm-hmm.
She's inaudible. I cannot hear at all what she's saying, including the steps that could be taken.
سامعينك واضح الكلام. Matteo or Max?
Yes, yeah. It's just that there were some problems with the interpreter, and I was listening that he wasn't able to listen to the audio again. So I'm sorry about this. But thank you so much, Dr. Ahlam, for your answer. We have 3 hands raised. I will start from Dr. Jaribu.
Thank you, and good morning again, comrades, and really appreciate all of the expert witnesses being so thorough in walking us through some of the examples, the egregious examples of how the U.S. has played a role in the plundering and the massacring and the genocidal practices that we see in the Middle East. We are in total solidarity with our brothers and sisters and our family in the region. And so my question is, being in the belly of the beast, so to speak, living in the United States, what pressure can be brought to bear on specific corporate entities who are responsible for financing what we have heard today? Are there specific corporations that we should be targeting through boycotts, including banks and corporations that are located in the U.S., but also have tentacles outside the U.S.? So we'd like to know what pressure can we bring to bear.
Thank you, Comrade Jaribo, for your questions. I mean, very important. Is any of the speakers want to take take this question? Jamal, yes, go ahead.
Yes. Well, I believe that the best thing to be done inside the United States is to have like a lobby that could boycott all institutions or pressure all institutions, financial institutions that are financing Israel, because Israel gets support from governmental and non-governmental agencies in the United States. So I believe that this could be a first step. In addition, raising awareness about the crimes committed by the United States in their support to Israel on one hand, whether in Israel's aggressions against Lebanon or Syria, or against the Palestinians inside the occupied territories. And of course, to raise awareness about the crimes committed by the United States itself, whether in Iraq or in Syria in the meantime. So I believe that this is the best that could be done, to raise awareness and try to pressure some agencies that are supporting the military effort of the United States on one hand and the military effort of the Zionist entity.
Thanks so much, Jamal, for your answer. I would move to Dr. Mohammed Tai, who raised his hand. So please go ahead, Dr. You need to unmute yourself.
نعم شكرا. أنا
One of my friends offered me certain documents about the accusations pertaining to Hezbollah in reference to drug trafficking that I sent them to Brother Riyadh in Arabic, and they could be, and how these accusations were fabricated and therefore removing the sanctions or the punishments. That's one point. There are a number of questions as well for Dr. Professor Ahlam Beydoun. Question: did the sanctions include the health care services that relate to Hezbollah? The other point is that America punished those who are corrupt. So who are the corrupt people that America punished? Number three, that the connection of Lebanon through land, the world, is there a different way apart from the Syrian landmass, and has therefore the sanctions impacted in that area of the land access? And Professor Jamal, the question, is there a clear role in America's hand in the Sabra and Shatila massacre? And then if you wish, if you could give us in points the aspects of American aid to Israel in the War of Tammuz. The United States, was it inciting continue warring or continue firing at each other, or did it want to cease fire? And thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Tai, for your very insightful questions. Dr. Ahlam, you want to go first?
Of course, the sanctions were imposed basically on Hezbollah, but these sanctions extended to the entire Lebanese people. I said that they imposed sanctions on all the activities, basically service, but as far as the health sector is concerned, it imposed sanctions that it harmed the Lebanese people because Hezbollah have their channels that they could still continue to have their money, aid money received uninterrupted. As far as the corrupt people, there was no accusation that stuck to them, but it took that as a pretext to implicate one or two ministers given their positionality or proximity to Hezbollah, because he also is an ally of Hezbollah, that some of the Lebanese are accused of corruption, but they never had an actual conviction handed to them at a court of law of corruption. These American sanctions doesn't really aim to fight corruption, because if it really did, or if it really wants to fight corruptions, they would have put those people to court, taken them to court. I said this. Any of the regimes in Iran and Chile or anywhere else, how many countries had their regimes overturned, basically turned upside down or overthrown, and they weren't really corrupt, but they were popular-based, people-based systems. What did I say about corruption?
Thank you, Dr. Ahlam. Jamal, did you follow up, comrade?
Well, with regards to, I'll speak in English. With regards to the Israeli support or to the US support to Israel, first, it comes in the form of financial support, not only to the government, but more in specific to the military, to the Israeli military, in the form of financial support. In addition, it comes in the form of supplying sophisticated weapons and ammunition to the Israelis, to the Israeli army. And third, it comes in the form of political support, whether in granting the green light for all aggressions that have been directed against Lebanon, or in the form of blocking any international intervention, whether by other superpowers or by the United Nations, to block or to enforce a ceasefire, for example. As for the 2006 aggression, actually the United States was the one that was encouraging Israel to keep going in its aggression against Lebanon. However, it was the Israelis who suffered from heavy losses at the hands of the Lebanese resistance, especially in the last 2 days when the Lebanese resistance was able to destroy 50 tanks, at least 50 tanks, and was able to kill and injure hundreds of soldiers, Israeli soldiers, that Israel could no longer declare that it could no longer keep going in this aggression because it was enduring heavy losses, and at the same time it wasn't achieving any military or political objective from this aggression. Meanwhile, the United States, for example, was supplying Israel with ammunition, especially when Israel ran out of ammunition in the first 2 weeks of after the aggression. So it was the United States that renewed all stockpiles of ammunition for Israel in order for it to be able to continue its aggression for another 20 days. So the whole period of the aggression was 33 days.
Thank you, Comrade Jamal. Thank you so much. Dr. Zaher, Rafiq, would you like to add something to these questions that you heard so far to the discussion? Okay, I guess دكتور زاهد بدك أقول لك إشي مع السؤال ولا لا؟ أوكي تمام. One second, Dr. Ahlam, we have Comrade Eliyahu has been raising her hands for a while now, so please go ahead.
Thank you so much.
شو سألني سؤالين تانيين ما عرفت عن شو غير سؤال الفساد والعقوبات الصحية شو سأل
I think Dr. Muhammad asked me two questions that I didn't answer them.
I asked
Would you repeat your
access or landmass access of Lebanon. Can Lebanon, can't it have access through land with any of the other countries? What else did you ask? That was his, I said that Syria is the extension of Lebanon to the inland. I asked us for the health sectors. I said that the sanctions, that the hospitals, the clinics, yes, it included everything. Oh, that was it. Thank you. Of course, in an indirect way. And that's.
Do you want to answer now?
I answered and said that the land access through Syria is Lebanon's access into the region by land. So therefore, when sanctions are imposed,
okay,
that impedes or obstructs transportation and logistics within Syria, that it extends into the whole region.
Bilizim, and apologies, is that I wasn't following the translation before. Okay. Comrade Eliyahu, yeah.
Thank you again. Thank you, Comrade. And thank you to everyone for your insightful testimonies. My question, I want to go back to the topic of corruption. And perhaps Dr. Ahlam would be able to elaborate on this a little bit. I'm wondering if you believe there is a relationship. Can you hear me in the translation? I'm wondering if you believe there is a relationship between sanctions that are imposed and the rate of corruption, or the conditions, like how sanctions create conditions for corruption in Lebanon, and if there is a relationship at all, and if so, how is that then used as a justification, as you said, or my understanding from your response was that there is a justification. Corruption is used as a justification to impose and target more individuals that are targeted for, we know in reality for different reasons, but corruption is used as a justification to impose further sanctions. So is there, like, does economic sanctions encourage shadow economy, if you will, and create conditions of corruptions in the country?
There is no doubt that these sanctions perpetuate, even on the popular level, the loss of goods and materials and products, and feeds it the corruption a little more. Did it contribute to corruption on the government level, or power, basically, on the power level, the power makers level? Well, it's a very intricate board game in Lebanon. The sanctions create corruption. I don't know, let Dr. Zaher talk to this. Did corruption come about from sanctions? That's possible. My opinion, well, maybe the lenience of the United States with the people who rule in Lebanon had empowered them to become more corrupt, or to become corrupt, period.
Thank you, Dr. Ahlam. Thank you. Are there any other comments from the jury? Yes, Jaribo, please comment.
Yes, I wonder if
America hired basically the head of the Central Bank of Lebanon. It's only America that backs such positions. So therefore, this corrupt ruler of the Central Bank of Lebanon, who carried out all of his acts of corruption with politicians, is an American product. We cannot be necessarily through sanctions, but through the interventions in the domestic affairs of nations.
I'm happy to yield if that's what we need.
I don't know what's happening. I mean, it's not, probably it cannot hear us. I don't know, but if it comes back, I will let you know. Thanks. Sorry, apologies.
So at the beginning of our time together, our comrade Max indicated that one of the goals was to draw a distinction between sanctions that are probably righteously assigned to Israel and South Africa, and the sanctions that we're here to denounce. So wondered if any of the expert witnesses would like to share their thoughts on how to make sure that these issues are clarified.
Yeah. Jamal, yes.
If I may comment on the issue of corruption, is this what I get from Comrade Jaribo?
Yes, Dr. Ahlam.
So intervention in countries helps in corruption. I said that the head of the Central Bank of Lebanon is an American product. And he's the one who brought about corruption when he bribed the politicians to expand their profits together.
Thanks, Dr. Ahlam. Jamal, you're back.
Yeah, sorry. Was I supposed to? I believe I understood that I had to comment on the issue of corruption. Am I right? That was what Comrade Jaribu asked about. Yeah.
Just to be clear, I was wanting some of the actual witnesses to comment on one of our goals, which is to distinguish between sanctions that should be called for against Israel and South Africa and the sanctions that we are here to denounce.
Well, the issue of sanctions, the United States has taken a pretext to impose sanctions on Lebanon. It took corruption as a pretext. But as Dr. Ahlam said, the United States itself, for example, has appointed corrupt people to run our economy, including the head of the Central Bank of Lebanon, Riyad Salemi, who was chosen, handpicked by the United States itself. Not only him, the Minister of Finance, our former Minister of Finance, who became Prime Minister later on, Fuad Sanyura, was presented as a technocrat at the time, as an expert, who, and it turned out that he was one of the most corrupt people ever. So the issue of corruption in 1992, actually, it was the United States that handpicked the key elements in the Hariri government, including Hariri himself, to run the economy. Sorry, to run the economy of Lebanon to reach these results. And I believe that back then, Mr. Zaher el-Khatib, who was member of parliament, my father, who was also member of parliament, alongside the former Prime Minister Salim al-Hus and other figures like former Speaker of Parliament Hussein Husseini, tried to alert us about the threats and the dangerous policies that were adopted by Hariri upon the request and recommendation of the United States. So it's not a secret, actually, in Lebanon. Everybody talks about it.
Thank you, Comrade Jamal. Is Dr. Zaher back? Does he want to? Yeah, Dr. Mohammed, please.
انا الاستاذ زاهر يعني في امكانيه بتصور انه
Mr. Zaher, is there? It's just difficult to connect, but I spoke with him to speak. But I don't know, there seems to be a problem.
Okay.
But he wants to speak. So I just want to ask him that Jamal Wakim was saying that truly have the sanctions specifically reached the health sectors or not, the hospitals? Because there is chatter about attacking the hospitals and the clinics. It's several hospitals, Hora Hospital and other. I'm asking specifically this piece: was there an attack on the hospitals or not? I mean, sanctions imposed directly on the hospitals or not? Thank you.
Jamal, do you want to pick this up?
Well, I believe that this should have been answered by Ahlam based on this, but I believe that she answered previously, saying that the health establishments sanctioned by the United States, the health establishments. Hello? Yeah, okay. So the health institutions owned by Hezbollah were also targeted by US sanctions.
Yes, okay. So I would like to also ask questions, but before doing so, I was wondering whether Dr. Zaher is with us and he wants to intervene in the conversation or not. Dr. Zaher.
عفوا عم نحاول معه
دكتور محمد عم تسمعونا؟
My question is, I was asking if, as far as the sanctions, if Mr. Zaher has any information, if the sanctions that it reached the health services related to Hezbollah, and how did it have any impact on the Lebanese people, not only just on the Hezbollah people only? Are they just political partisan people only, or is a clear question? What do you want to know about Hezbollah? Please give me a clear question. I'm asking about Hezbollah or Hezbollah. Are there sanctions upon the health services related to Hezbollah? And if there are sanctions, does it impact the Lebanese people outside of Hezbollah or not? That's the clear question I have. It's very clear. And I'm about to clarify. Let me say it clearly, explicitly, and ostensibly that the audio is very choppy. I cannot hear anything that's being said right now in the reply.
Yeah, no, we cannot hear, no. No, I think he lost the connection. So maybe when Dr. Zaher comes back, we will try to answer these questions again. I just wanted to ask one question to the expert witness, to everybody, Jamal or Dr. Ahlam. We've been talking a lot about the role of the U.S. war on Lebanon, the allies in the region, Israel. So about imperialism and Zionism, but I wonder, I'm wondering about the question of reactionism, and in particular, if there is any role being played by the regional allies from the Gulf on waging the war on Lebanon. So if you could please get any thoughts.
Well, actually, if we go back to actually most wars, or let's say all wars waged by Israel, had the consent of Saudi Arabia, starting with 1967.
Just let me carry this down.
Starting with 1967 war against Egypt, Syria, and Jordan at the time, all the way to the 1978 aggression against Lebanon. Then in 1982, actually, it was much clearer, the Saudi involvement in in giving the green light for an Israeli aggression against Lebanon, because at the time in 1981, Crown Prince Fahd bin Abdulaziz, who became king later on, passed an initiative, a peace initiative, that was opposed by Syria, by the PLO, and by most Lebanese left at the time. After the invasion, and due to the tilt in the balance of power to the favor of Israel in the early weeks of the invasion, Syria and the PLO accepted the Fahd initiative. So what they opposed before the invasion,
المليارات باعتراف الامريكيين. واضح؟
Jamal, the comrade, just 1 second, okay?
Yeah.
Yeah. Dr. Zaher, can you hear us now? Do you want to, do you want to answer the questions that you were asked before?
هل أصبح واضحا؟
Is it clear now? Is the connection clear now?
Maybe. Yeah, go ahead.
ألو هل ثم
Is there something unclear? I take responsibility, but if it's clear, please tell me. It's now clear that, or should I repeat the sentence in different words?
Go ahead. Just continue. Maybe switch the video. It's better if you switch the video when you're talking.
The sentence is not clear?
It's clear.
That if you have American allies, we also you bring from the Americans or from the French or allies. The Lebanese people will also bring friends from Hezbollah. Leave Hezbollah alone. We will bring you from Iran. We'll bring you from China. We'll bring you from Venezuela. What do they want? Do they continue to want to be dogs under the shoe of the Americans? Samir Gaga and his likes, and Sanyora and Amir Jmail and Bashir Jmail. What happened to Republic at Israeli Hanks? It's known to the whole world. What's not clear, my friend, my comrade, Habibi, is it clear or not clear to this point? Okay, that's it. All right, agreed. Is the meeting concluded or is there something else?
We are still, we were answering the question about the regional allies of America on Saudi Arabia and the Gulf countries, and Dr.
Yes.
Jamal was answering. Please continue, comrade.
Yes. So the aggression against Lebanon in 1993 had the tacit consent of Saudi Arabia and Egypt at the time, because they wanted to promote peace between the PLO and Israel, which was opposed by Lebanon and Syria at the time. Also, well, the implication and involvement of Saudi Arabia, the Gulf states, and Egypt, alongside other reactionary Arab powers, was clearer in the 1996 aggression against Lebanon, because they all gathered alongside the United States and Western powers in Sharm el-Sheikh under the pretext of fighting terrorism, and this was a prelude for the aggression against Lebanon. In 2006, in the aggression, in the first days of the aggression against Lebanon, there were declarations by the Saudis that accused Hezbollah of being adventurists, and they called for on Syria and Lebanon to accept what they considered as the Arab Peace Initiative of 2002. So in all these aggressions, the Arab reactionary states were part of it, were actually supporting it and giving the green light for it, because they thought that it was promoting their agenda for a regional order in the region. So it's no secret, and you have their declaration in the media if you go back to the archives.
Thanks, Comrade Jamal. So I think this is where we see the continuity and also the comment that Comrade Jaribo was making before about, you know, the importance of the sanctions on Israel vis-a-vis South Africa. You know, it is so clear why this needs to be, you know, needs to be raised. Yes, Maria, Dr. Lahoud, please.
Thank you so much. Thank you to all of the experts for your powerful testimony, especially on the destructive impacts that the economic coercive measures have had on the people of Lebanon. I was wondering if anyone can speak to any movements in Lebanon that are organizing to resist or challenge the economic coercive measures, or how people are doing that in general. Thank you.
Well,
yeah.
Okay. In Lebanon now, we have several groups actually. We have the parties that are pro U.S. agenda, such as Lebanese Forces, the Phalange Party, and a new rising movement. What they call themselves the Change Movement. Or Taghiriyin. They are financed by US NGOs and European NGOs, and they act as a party, a liberal party in Lebanon to promote US agenda. Against this agenda, we have Hezbollah and its allies, but we need also, we have some reservations on some of its allies because, for example, the Amal movement is much implicated and involved in corruption and in corrupt government and in dealings and alliances drawn with Jumblat, who is also pro-US agenda in the country, and with the Lebanese forces. So we cannot divide the groups into clear black and white. We have many groups inside this gray area. Let's say we don't have a radical left. The radical left is very weak. It's divided. The official Communist Party, too bad, it's pro-US agenda. They have been working with the US NGOs to promote US agenda in the country under the pretext of fighting corruption and corrupt government. So this is the map. As for real radical powers, they are very weak and they are isolated. They are trying to be active, but and promote a certain agenda, but for the time being, they are very weak.
Thank you, Comrade Jamal. As we are wrapping up our hearing today, I would like to ask Dr. Ahlam if she has any other thoughts that she wants to share with us in relation to the last question.
سمعت السؤال منيح لأنه الصوت.
Could you please repeat the question again, as I couldn't hear clearly?
I was just asking if there are any movements in Lebanon organizing to resist or challenge the economic coercive measures, or how people are doing that generally.
Well, the economic pressures on Lebanon are very extensive, to the point that the people are looking for how to survive. Are there movements? Sure. There are divisions in Lebanon, but even the people the entities that with the American imperial positionality, they're also still on the receiving end on many of the sanctions and the pain that comes with that. So there is a way for Lebanese expatriates to help their families here. And that is a type of resistance to these kinds of sanctions. But is this that these sanctions need to be put on trial, need to be introduced, brought to court? So the question is there a strength to the law to face the American hegemony? So we know that power rules the world. So the question really is, how could we raise cases and litigations? Of course, there's a lot of anger, and there's a lot of disagreements to these sanctions. But I spoke in my statement how the United States asked from the Lebanese Lebanon to impose sanctions on Hezbollah, for example. Of course, the Lebanese government is incapable of imposing sanctions on Hezbollah because Hezbollah basically is part of the Lebanese state, part of Lebanese power and Lebanese government. So there is a sense of avoidance from this sanctions move. But the banks punished a bunch of individuals who the United States asked them to sanction, and of the 99 individuals that they closed their accounts.
Thank you, Dr. Ahlam, thank you for sharing your thoughts your concluding thoughts with us. Once again, today we have learned so much. We have learned that US imperialism is waging a war on another country of the global south, being Lebanon. We have learned that there is no such thing as surgical sanctions on leaders, and as there are no surgical bombs like the ones that NATO dropped on Libya, or like the ones that the Israelis are dropping on Gaza. I want to thank you, everybody, from the expert witnesses today, that they have joined us and have shared their expertise and their testimonies about the imperialist war on Lebanon. I also want to thank our jurors that they've been with us, sharing our thoughts and leading us to a much more fruitful discussion. I want to thank Max. I want to thank also Charlotte in particular, that has kept us all on track with various technological hurdles that we experienced today. And I want to thank also, in particular, the translators who have done a great job, allowing us to understand each other and to continue this, they're so fundamental to understand, to bring us together and continue this struggle. And I want to thank also the attendees. So we see next week for our next hearing on Syria. Thank you, everybody, comrades. Have a great day.